Hi, everyone. Welcome. I am Angela Love-Zaranka, Program Director for Lactation Education Resources.
And I am Sekeita Lewis Johnson. I am the Accredited Provider Program Director here at LER. Thank you so much for joining us.
Our topic today is 90 days and counting, how to create a study plan for the IBCLC or IBLCE exam. So I am a person, just to give you a little background on myself, I have been working in peer support for breastfeeding for over 30 years, and I've been board certified for over 25. I've actually served on both the professional organizations board of directors as well as the certifying board of directors. And so I have experience in all of those different avenues, and I'm here to help you to create that study plan. And Sekeita is my co-facilitator today. Sekeita, tell us a little something about you.
Yes, thanks, Angela. I've been a nurse for over 25 years now. I have always worked in maternal child health, and I bring you experience as an IBCLC. Actually, I recertified. This is 15 years for me this year. Prior to that, I was up here and I was providing support probably 5 years, about 20 years. I'm also a nurse educator. I am one of the instructors for LER. I wear multiple hats. I've also have a private practice and I've worked in the hospital setting. So I've worked community and in the hospital. So lots of different hats, but I will digress so we can get you started into this 90 days and counting.
Great, thanks. So just a couple of housekeeping notes here. If you want to comment or ask a question and you're participating today on a laptop, please take a look at this box, which is identified by the blue arrow in the GoToWebinar interface. You'll notice here in the middle of the screen, you'll see a spot for questions. So you can questions or comments. And if you are joining us today on a mobile device, you can find the questions box at the bottom of the interface control panel. And you can see here by the green arrow. Go ahead and pop in today where you are participating from, where in the world you are listening to us today. And we would love to know that information as we move forward. We have people here helping today. So if you have questions, we have Kim from our amazing customer support team. Kim is going to be answering the questions in the questions box, and she will flag a couple for Sekeita and I to answer at the end. We also have Jill here today. So if you're having any issues with any sort of tech issues with your device, with the interface, please feel free to type something into the questions box and Jill can take care of it. You'll also notice that there's a couple of presentations in this handout. One is a sample study plan, and the other is a list of helpful websites to find out more information about the IBCLC exam and how LER can help you to prepare. Where is that indicator? It's also on the GoToWebinar interface. You should see a little box there that says handouts. Okay, great. I'm going to kick it over to Sekeita, who's going to review the objectives that we have for today.
Yes,
Sekeita?
thank you. Thank you, Angela, so much. I am going to begin with this quote that I have lived by. Not saying that you have to live by it, but it just makes sense to me as it relates to this topic. Proper preparation prevents poor performance. So that's why we're here today. We're here to help you get started to plan because that's extremely important to your success. So this meeting is to help you get organized so you will feel as prepared as you can be to sit this important exam. So today's webinar is helpful if you are taking the exam in the next 90 days or taking the exam maybe even next year. This will give you just a little lay of the land of how to go through a plan, a study plan that is, that can help you feel calm, prepared, and happy. So after today, please don't put off studying into the last minute. You know, just because you are dreading it, one of the things we want to encourage you to do is to pace yourself so that you don't get overwhelmed. So we'll kick off, we'll get started, and buckle up. All right, so developing your plan. Developing your plan, and this is strictly developing a plan of how to study for the IBLCE exam, okay? All righty. All right. So some of the advice that have come before me and will come before you and even during my time. Um, Pick out a learning method that works the best for you. If you are a person that thrives best on flashcards, you want to start making those now. You want to review the entire course, particularly as it relates to the detailed content outline, and that is the IBLCE's detailed content outline. You want to look over any of your notes. And you also, I know that the textbooks are like this big, and I know that you're not like walking textbooks. Remember that this exam is for the novice, it's the entry level clinician. So you want to, relax on memorizing the entire curriculum, things like the cranial nerves or all the enzymes or all the living cells. You really want to be able to show that you can make the best and prudent clinical decisions when it comes to working with dyads and families. So that's the information that I would like to pass on to you. How to know what to know. Now, I just said we're not walking, books and dictionaries, but this first bullet point says everything. And remember, I just said relax on remembering the cranial nerves. So I think I got ahead of myself when I said this is a level entry exam. It's really not possible for you to know everything that is fair game in a comprehensive, broad-based certification exam. So, according to IBLCE, everything that has been published in books or journals in the past year may be included on the exam, which is an incredible amount of knowledge. However, you want to keep in mind that this exam is designed to separate those who will be the competent novice lactation consultant and those who will not be safe working with families. So, the exam is extremely practice oriented, which means the more experience you have, the better. If you've only practiced in one setting, you might want to consider widening your scope a little bit by attending maybe some local support group meetings, visiting a clinic where lactation support and clinical care is offered, such as like an outpatient lactation clinic, or maybe in a pediatrician's office. There are so many ways to get additional experience. You may reach out to maybe a private practice person and ask to shadow for just a day, particularly if you've been someone that's working in a hospital setting, and then vice versa, right? If you've been someone that works in the community setting and doing in-home visits, you might want to see what are the opportunities, or if there are opportunities that you may be able to shadow a lactation consultant at your local hospital. So those are some options because the exam is private, very practice oriented. All right, so research shows that materials that are learned over a long length of time. I don't know why I'm tongue-tied this morning. And some people probably will laugh at the fact that I said tongue-tied, but that's the first thing that comes out my mouth because my words are just kind of okay. All right, so bear with me. So, material that's learned over a long length of time is retained better than cramming at the end. So, if you've made it through high school or college using last minute strategies, don't do this for this exam. It's really important. And it costs. It costs to retake the exam. So, in other words, what I'm saying is just get organized first. Put together all of your study materials, including the most effective ways that you learn. Create your own study notes. Personal study notes help you focus on the most relevant information to support your understanding of the topic. And as you rearrange and write the information, the act of writing the information helps your brain to work quickly to recall key points. So be prepared. And then after you've studied and you've each day, each time you've studied, reward yourself at the end. It's so important that we kind of honor the time that we've spent, but also we know that we also have to feed our soul in other ways. And so, yes, we're getting all this knowledge, but then there are other ways to reward yourself for a job well done as far as your preparation and the time you take to study. All right. Some folks like study groups and some people don't. But if a group think and group work is your thing, try to find a local study group or a study partner, or even a small online group, because sometimes it's hard to coordinate in person. But try to coordinate that with someone that has maybe a different clinical background than you have, and then commit to studying consistently and meeting consistently. So, if there's a couple folks in your area that are getting ready, it might help to like bounce ideas off of one another, share anxieties, even, and share study resources. So, if you're not taking the exam, if you don't know anyone taking the exam in your area, there are some online platforms that have study groups. So you want to check those out as well. I am hearing feedback in my mic. I just want to tech check. Are you hearing any feedback from me?
Not at all, Sekeita.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. All right, thanks, Angela. All right, so you want to set up a study schedule. So once you've kind of gotten all your materials, you know exactly what your resources are going to be, how you're going to study. Use the study guide that we have provided for you in the handout section, or even plan a different strategy. Look at our study guide and say, okay, yeah, this looks good, but I want to kind of differentiate here, right? Plan your study time when you're most alert. If that's in the morning for you, then morning. Sometimes people are night owls, then that's fine too. And also pick a time that you're less likely to be disturbed. So if it is maybe you have to get children off somewhere, or your pet might be, chomping at the bit to walk at this certain time of the day, maybe that's not the time. But you really have to sometimes negotiate with your family on some times that maybe they'll just let you be for a little bit and agree to not interrupt your study. So those are some of the things that may be helpful when you plan your study schedule. If you're a person that likes to listen to background noise, there's a couple apps there. Sometimes that helps focus. So good things. All right, so setting the schedule, we do have a helpful handout. This is kind of, if you're looking at it from a 30-day review schedule, really looking at it by topics. One of the things when you're setting your schedule, one of the things that I would recommend is you start with the topics that you are having the most trouble with. Some things you may just know. And I'm not saying that everyone knows positioning and attachment and all those things, and the nuances about those topics. However, those are probably like, you've had some experience in those, right? When I think about pathology and medication and those topics, you want to really start to get a handle on those things a little bit earlier. So as you're looking at this review, you might say, okay, these are the areas that I need the most help with. I'm going to start studying these 90 days out, 60 days out, whatever your study plan looks like. All right. The next slide is more of a visual plan. So I was just saying this the other day about I like electronic, but sometimes things overlap and it's very hard. So the visual plan for me helps so that I can see and I can write down things and I can write down extra. So however you determine it, but if you look at the first date, the first calendar, it says number 1, and then it says Tamika, pathology infant. And so that's assuming that maybe you're in a study group and maybe Tamika may be leading pathology. Maybe Tamika will be the instructor for that topic and review for that topic. And then you all study things together. Just putting it out there of the possibilities and range of ways that you can structure your study time. All right, and then these are textbook suggestions, breastfeeding answers, breastfeeding in human lactation, the breastfeeding atlas, the interdisciplinary lactation care core curriculum, and breastfeeding a guide for the medical profession. All good references. And the only thing I'm going to say about references is sometimes they differentiate in ranges. Don't get caught up in the ranges, get caught up in the knowledge and how you translate that knowledge into practice, if that makes sense. All right, so before passing, I love quotes if you haven't noticed, but before passing this to Angela, I want to leave you with this quote. Many students cannot pass their exam because they fail to sacrifice the minimal, the minimum capital of time and money. So, what are you saying, Sekeita? I'm saying that you are here in this group. You have sacrificed your time, your capital of time with us today. And I hope that from this day forward, you put forth the effort of all of these clinical pearls that we're throwing at you. So Angela, take it over.
Thanks so much, Sekeita. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual exam and the structure, as well as some strategies to tackle the structure for the exam. So one way to remember things, groups of things, is to utilize different strategies. Mnemonics is one way, and mnemonics are using words or first letters of a sentence in order to remember several things. For example, the latch system was developed to help lactation care providers remember what to look for. So L is for latch, A is for audible swallow, T is for nipple type, C is for comfort, and H is for the amount of help which is needed. A previous student suggested how to remember which hormones come from which part of the pituitary gland. And their idea was PAP, for prolactin is generated or created in the anterior pituitary, or OP, for oxytocin is created in the posterior pituitary. Great way to remember. There's also that trick of using a sentence to jog your memory. The old sentence that you may have learned in biology class, it might help you to remember the names or the number of the cranial nerves. Make up your own sentence or make up your own little acronym to help remember lists of things. If there are a list of information, remember to divide and conquer and subdivide into smaller segments. Consider the rule of 3. That seems to work best for most folks. We also have a phenomenal resource for you. It's called QBank. It is a great tool to help you with your studies. You can practice questions in tutor mode and learn the rationale behind the answers, or you can take it in test mode to simulate the online testing experience. I'll take a quick walk through some of the ways you can utilize it, and you can listen to this recording again for ideas on how to use QBank. So what you can do is you can go to QBank and turn off the tutor mode and set it to untimed to get a feel for the questions without the pressure of taking the exam in a short amount of time. Choose how many questions you would like in each category from the topics in the detailed content outline. And we do break it out by topics in the detailed content outline. Now to start, you may want to begin with a smaller size test, let's say 50 questions. We have over 600 items in our QBank at this time. Now let's say you want to choose all of the different categories or topics in the detailed content outline. And later, if you want to only study one area, you can truncate it, you can shorten it, and only select those filters. Then you want to take the test. Now you can mark the question that you're not quite sure about and you want to review it later. At the end, it tells you which questions you marked, which were right, which were wrong. And the nice thing about QBank is that we actually provide you with the rationale as far as why the correct answer was the correct answer. And we either give you page numbers in a textbook, or we provide you with research which backs up the reason why that answer was chosen. Now that's doing it in turning off tutor mode. Then you can do it in tutor mode. And then let's say when you're getting closer to the actual exam, you can take it in test mode and you can actually simulate the IBCLC exam and take a whole 175 question text. So it's important to know what is normal. So for example, know what's normal in regards to infant weight gain. How much should a baby gain and at what age? Also, it's helpful to know those normal stages of development. So the reason why it's important to know these normal things is because then you will know when something is abnormal and may potentially need intervention. Study your difficult topics with others, especially those who don't know anything about lactation. Why? Well, if you can actually take a concept like, let's say, the anatomy of the breast and how it works, and describe it in general terms to, like, let's say, your best friend or one of your older children, then it's really nice if you can explain it to them, someone who doesn't know, then chances are you know that subject well enough in order to be able to apply the knowledge that you have and to apply it to the exam. Also, another idea is, can you explain the pictures? Take a look and see what you identify. What are the key things that you're noticing in those pictures that will help you to formulate what could be going on in that specific picture? So talking through not only what you see and or a specific process in rather simplistic terms, but also then in the next step is what's that course of action, right? What is your plan of care going to be? After you see this, you identify this, here's why you identify it, and then what do you do about it? If you can sort of like take someone who doesn't know anything about lactation and breastfeeding care and provide that sort of explanation to them, then chances are you know the subject and we can move on to the next. The IBCLC exam consists of 175 questions. Now, some are regular multiple choice questions, and some questions are related to pictures. And some are going to be case study types of questions with the multiple choice options. And in the case studies, you may answer one question, and then the next question may build on that first question. So you may get several questions based on one specific scenario. The questions on the exam are often referred to as items, so you may hear that term being used. You will have 4 hours to complete the exam, or 240 minutes. Now, the entire exam is multiple choice questions. Each item, as I said, is made up of a stem, or the actual question, and then several choices, usually 4. That stem of the item can be phrased as a question, a partial sentence, or best choice. Now, in this example, the stem is about the onset of copious milk production. It can be phrased as a question. What is the stage when copious milk is produced? A partial sentence, the onset of copious milk production is called, or a best choice question. What is the best description of the onset of copious milk production? They're all asking about the same concept, just in different formats. And the choices could be lactogenesis 1, 2, 3, or 4. And yes, we are aware that lactogenesis 2 is sometimes called secretory activation. So indeed, you may see differences in certain terms. And so it's important to know what those interchangeable terms are. I think lactogenesis is probably one of those few things. So it's not like there's like 1,000 things where you need to know alternate words. I think this phrasing of lactogenesis has changed within the past, 10 years. So when you take a look at the question, read the stem of the question and answer it mentally. Think about what the correct answer could be. Read the choices. Now, eliminate those that you know are not correct so they don't distract you. And you can concentrate on differentiating between the choices that are left. Tentatively choose the first answer on the list that seems correct, then compare the other selections to that one. If there is a better answer, then select that one and continue. Maybe there's another answer which will be even better, and then do a final check to make sure that you read the question correctly. If you don't find one that you think is correct, read the stem again carefully to make sure you understood. The perfect answer, according to you, may not be one of the choices. So choose the best one. And if you're not sure, just venture a guess and mark that one to review later. Now, all of the information is in the stem. It is probably there for a reason. The distractors are in the possible answers, not in the stem. Watch for words that change the meaning of what came before. Words such as but, however, although, even though, while, despite, in spite of, or regardless of. Watch the context of the question. An answer can be right, but not correct for this situation. Now, the choices are going to fall into three categories. There are sophisticated distractors and unsophisticated distractors. Now, an unsophisticated distractor is something that's easy, that you might know anyway, or something that's obviously wrong. And then, of course, there's the correct answer. So there's going to be three choices to eliminate. So keep an eye on that. Make sure that you're reading the stem of the question, understand what they're actually asking, and then choose the best answer. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Sekeita, who's going to talk to you about first impressions.
Thanks, Angela. So I love doing lives because it gives me an opportunity to reflect. And also, every single live I've done, I've said after it, wow, why didn't I mention concept mapping at the very beginning? So before I go into first impressions, I'm going to go a little bit off script a little bit and insert that I know that not every person's are linear learning, right? So sometimes concept mapping, and if you need an idea of what concept mapping is like, you can Google it, but concept mapping is another way to kind of put topics in and you really just write out things and writing them in your own mind and process and how your mind works also is a great study exam technique or strategy that I wanted to throw out there because it came up again, and I'm like, I still didn't put that in my slide. So here we go. So now that I've said that, I'm going to hop into first impressions. As Angela stated before, read the stem of the question all the way through, then read each answer all the way through and then indicate your answer. Your first answer is most likely the correct answer. So try not to second guess yourself. Remember, your first impression is like, ooh, that's it. So be real reluctant to change unless you're like, like you're like 99.9%, like, nope, this is the correct answer. Because, I know I've had this experience, but I'm sure many of you have probably taken a test, changed your original answer only to find out that you had it correct all along. And to me, that's the worst feeling ever. So, what I want you to do is to try not to read more into the question than what it is asking you. The answer is there. There is only one best answer. And think about the word that I said. What is the best answer? So use the answer options to provide you with hints about the things you need to know. And you want to watch out for any answer that includes the word always, because we know that rarely is there a situation in lactation and even life that falls into an always category. Usually it's most of the time, yes, but always not really, right? And then there may, or I'm thinking there may not be, the nurse educator in me says there may not be any all of the above choices for answers. These generally don't really answer or show that you know the material. So, I wish it could be that easy sometimes, but no, all of the above may not be there. All right, so when to guess. Whew. Know when to guess. If you are uncertain of the correct answer, eliminate the options that you know that are definitely wrong and then make your choice. And then the system is set up so that you can flag the choice and then you can really consider it at the end of the exam and you can go back to it. That is if you have enough time. So, and if you really have no idea, you have about a 25% chance of it being correct if you guess. And if you can eliminate at least one option, then you increase your odds to 33%. So if you're not sure about any number, like sometimes there's ranges in the answer. So if you're not sure about a number answer, really, unless this is if you're unsure. This is not, in general, what I'm saying is because it could be the right answer. But if you're unsure, toss out the high and the low and consider the middle range numbers. And if you have no idea of an answer, check for lookalike options. Check for the most inclusive option, the option that contains the most information. So that's the longest sentence there. Sometimes will be the right answer, and that's only if you don't know the answer. Think about what it might be similar to, anything you've seen or read or heard, and relate it to, making also like, okay, I've had this experience. Not saying that our experience, is the answer, but you can really try to relate it to some of the experience you've had and then make an educated guess based on your experience. And if one of the options is totally in the answers, if one of the options is totally unfamiliar, be real suspicious. Something that you've never heard of before or really seems unrelated to the STEM is likely to be one of the distractors that Angela talked about. So, after eliminating the obvious wrong answers, select your first option. It's up to you, but select the answer in the same. Let me start. Let me go. Let me slow down. Some exam statisticians recommend setting up a predetermined strategy for guessing on the questions that you are clueless about. So, for example, after eliminating the obvious wrong answers, select the first option or the last option, but you want to stay consistent. If you decide you're going to select the first option, continue to select the first option or select the last option. It's up to you. But if you always select the answer in the same position, then you increase your odds that your guess will randomly be correct. When it comes to picture items, about half of the questions will be based on a picture. One of the things that you will be given pictures as options, you will be asked to either define a condition or a diagnosis. You will be asked to distinguish between normal and abnormal. Looking at this picture, for instance, of this adorable child on the left-hand side, you might be asked to determine this child's age just by their posture, size, or behavior. All right, sometimes you might have to determine a problem, or you might have to determine if there's asymmetry noticed, as in this other photo on the right side. So pictures can be used in a case study where you're asked to recommend a care plan and decide what you would recommend first. Remember that option. Um, so with that being said, you really want to take a moment and look at the picture and really not too long because you don't want to spend so much time trying to decipher all the stuff in the room, like the toy over there on the other side. You just want to look at the child as it relates to the actual question. So when you answer the picture item, one of the things I say is read the question first and then look at the picture so you can pick out the important features faster. So, and if the answer is not immediately obvious to you, you can visually divide the picture up into quarters and look at each quarter closely. Images may not be as obvious on as obvious as this picture on the top, which is massive mastitis. A more likely image is the redness seen just under the nipple on the image at the very bottom. It's more subtle. So read the question first, look at the picture, read the question again, then look at the image one more time, and then choose the correct answer. Now, I'm going to warn you that some of the images are not perfect. Some may appear dated. Some may seem unclear. It's really challenging to get good clinical images with the proper lighting setting and context that are crystal clear. Remember, photos are taken while we're out practicing. So that means that the lighting has to be perfect, all of that. And we know that it's challenging to get those types of pictures. So um, remember that the IBLCE is comprised of IBCLCs. They have thoroughly reviewed the question and the images and the image to ensure that all the information is there for you to answer each question. All right, now moving on to common problems. Uh-oh, there we go. Right. So, common problems that we run into when we take tests. Sometimes we read too much information into the question. I think Angela talked about that. I think I spoke to that. Just take it at face value. All the information is in the question that you want to consider. Another saying is, and Angela loves this saying. I've heard Angela say this a lot. Don't look for zebras in New York City's Central Park. You're going to look for the most common likely answer in Central Park. You are most likely to see a horse and not a zebra. So there's that. Watch out for clarifiers and qualifiers such as always, never, least likely, most likely, the first thing you would do, or the best choice. Qualifiers will tell you and will give you a hint at what the answer is going to be. Don't just like this happens a lot. You're taking an exam, you read the question, and A is seems like it is the answer. You know it's A, and so you circle A and you don't read B, C, and D, or E, F if you have a really like happy instructor that's like loading the test with answers, but really read through because just because it seems like it might be obvious, you might miss really what the question was really asking you. So, I'm not going to belabor that, but I really do want you to read every single answer. For those who are advanced practice nurses, midwives, or physicians, remember there is a need to answer the question like an IBCLC, and this can be tricky when you've been trained or you've been practicing for a long time. So make sure you're reading the question as a lactation consultant, novice entry lactation consultant, that is. All right. Angela, I am going to pass it over. No, I'm not passing it to you. What to do when you're stuck? I think the screen flipped or something. I'm not sure. So you might look, and if your mind goes blank, don't panic. Remember, I said um, that there's a flag, you can flag it, but the first thing you want to do is take a deep breath because sometimes we breath hold when we're taking an exam like this, and when we breath hold, the oxygen to our brain, it kind of goes down a little bit. So you want to take some deep breaths. You want to keep breathing. You want to get oxygen to your brain, and then think of real situations like the one in the question. You want to proceed logically using your common sense. Read the stem and the choices, and don't choose the familiar. If you get stuck, you do want to answer it, but move on and come back later. Now, Angela, I think exam content is next. I know I saw that screen, so go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Sekeita. Yes, I apologize for flipping through those slides a little too quickly. So now we're going to actually talk about the exam content. So the exam is known as a reference-based exam, which means that it's based on the current medical literature. It's based on literature in the current textbooks. Take a look at the compendium of research that has been validated, peer-reviewed, and in the pipeline for a few years. Also, you can take a look at the ABM protocols. The ABM is the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, and their website is bfmed.org. They are a group of interdisciplinary physicians from around the world, and they have made statements on specific topics. For example, on discharge, on supplementation. And so going to those wonderful resources may be an opportunity for you to learn how to actually work with specific scenarios. Now, things that are not included will be unvalidated research. That means that additional study has not been done to support the conclusions, or additional research did not support the original study. Anecdotal materials, verbal statements, websites, conference presentations are not included. Only things that are written in a peer-reviewed journal may be included, such as the Journal of Human Lactation or Breastfeeding Medicine. Also the textbook, Breastfeeding Answers, or Breastfeeding and Human Lactation, those are both evidence-based textbooks. Now, don't go down a rabbit hole thinking of the ifs and the buts or the one-off presentations. If you hear yourself say, well, I knew a case where, chances are you're going down the rabbit hole. Now, the exam covers all of these topics as they relate to breastfeeding and lactation and human milk. Please go to the IBLCE website, to the IBLCE document section, and you can access the detailed content outline. You can print it out if you wish. I know there are some groups of candidates who will create a Google Doc and have others add relevant content in that outline. One of the previous LER groups actually started a Google Doc and they posted it in a group discussion that they created. They give everyone access to the document, and as each one found like different relevant facts under each different topic, they would add it to the appropriate section. And I met someone a few days prior to that exam administration, and they had printed out the document and they were going through it. They'd put it in their conference bag, and they actually were going through the multiple pages of it, sort of as their own little refresher notes right before the exam. Makes sense. Now, I created these tables from the IBLCE test analysis report. Now, IBLCE will publish a broad overview on exam performance a few months after the previous exam. Now, I have this information to show you about how well people did on the exam by cohort. So one thing to note here is that most first-time people who took the exam passed. In April, the April administration in that year, which was 2019, it was 81%. In October, it was 72%. Now, the reason for the difference is that in the first exam administration, they only allow the language, or excuse me, the exam is only offered in English. And in the September or October administration, then you have all the different languages from around the world. And so there could be an issue with the translation. Actually, not an issue with the translation, but in the people who are sitting for the exam, there is a difference as far as how those folks score if they're studying the information in a tongue, in their mother tongue, which may not be English. And so they usually do not perform as well on the exam as the native English speakers do. Now, take a look at the note on the recertification by exam group. Now, that data is a bit skewed. Now, these are people who are taking the exam at the 30 or 35 year mark, and note that 100% of them passed. Well, regardless, that cohort did score best on the exam because they've probably taken the exam multiple times, and chances are they are my colleagues who actually teach the different lactation courses. And so, therefore, they're in this data, they're in this research, they're teaching all the time. So chances are they're probably going to know, and they're probably going to do well on the exam. That's one of the nice things about having interns and having those that we're mentoring. It really does keep us on our toes and make sure that we are doing, saying all the right things. Now, in analyzing the exam results from all candidates in 2 consecutive years, You can see how these topics seem to give the most difficulties. Now, I know that the disciplines have slightly changed with the update of the detailed content outline. IBLCE provided this granular data back in 2014 and 2015, and they are no longer doing it. But just take a look at those topics which scored below 75%. Here we have like immunology and infectious disease. Currently, that would be considered pathology. Also, growth parameters and developmental milestones. That is also something which scored less than 75%. Now, there was a slight shift with pathology, which was a little less. Pharmacology and toxicology improved. Psychology, sociology, and anthropology declined. And interpretation of research improved. So these are areas where you may want to spend a little bit extra time. So one common question is, well, what should I study? Now you can see here the number of items for each section of the detailed content outline. Now that's going to give you an idea about how the test is weighted. IBLCE has a range for the number of items in any given discipline based on the latest practice analysis of current IBCLCs. IBLCE will choose the specific number of items included in each discipline from year to year. So it may shift, it may change, but they will have a range. The exam also covers each of these chronological periods, from preconception to the toddler, with the majority of questions clustered in the early newborn timeframe. Now here are the test scores for the different chronological stages. While you can see that there are some areas of improvement, for example, with the 15 to 28-day-old group, and a decline, such as in prenatal setting, it appears that candidates are very good at the first few days, but seem to have more difficult with older babies. Find or ask for pictures of babies at stages who you currently do not work with. There are some resources, for example, the Stanford Library has their online library for newborn care. The CDC website has different developmental milestones, which was updated a couple of years ago, and the Breastfeeding Atlas. You can also quiz yourself with those pictures. Now, if you're not experienced with supporting older babies, you can try to go to a lactation support group with permission from the facilitator to observe and to listen to what these parents were talking about. So don't panic. You may be asking yourself, what should I know that I don't know on the exam, but I don't know it? You will be prepared. You're starting now. Phenomenal, phenomenal thing to do is to start as you're listening to my voice. Believe in yourself. Haven't the families that you've worked with benefited from your suggestions and your information? As Sekeita was saying earlier, pace yourself. Take your vocabulary words with you wherever you go. Use little pockets of unexpected time to study. Do watch for signs of excessive stress. Symptoms can include mental, social, and physical problems. Mental stress can show up as being forgetful, confused, agitated, or spacey. Social stress can show up as being irritable, argumentative, or withdrawn. Stress can also show up in physical problems such as cold sores, bladder infections, eczema, GI upset, or even catching a cold. Do what works best for you to reduce that stress. Okay, Sekeita, I think we have a few questions in the chat. I did see one, excuse me, that I think we should probably address. That fits nicely with this topic, which
Yes, the question is,
is,
how many questions of the 175 total do you have to get correct in order to pass?
So that is actually a number that shifts from year to year. And I'm going to explain in this webinar why. So we do have a blog post as far as the why is concerned, but the bottom line is that it shifts from year to year as far as the number, as well as what the passing score needs to be, shifts slightly from year to year. And so what they do is they'll take a look, let's say they take a question on, let's say on position and latch. And not only do they take a look at how well the item performed, how well that question performed, did it perform as statistically they had expected? And so they actually do a psychometric analysis of each individual question. So as a result, they do the analysis of the question. Did it perform as it was expected? If the answer is no, then they try to dig in. And so then you've got your subject matter experts, your IBCLCs who actually wrote the exam. They take a look at it along with the statistician, the psychometrician, in order to determine why it may not have answered, it may not have performed that well. And so therefore, if they take a look at it and they see that it didn't perform well, then they may do a little further analysis. For example, let's say that one of the questions which was translated into French did not perform as well. And it was only that French cohort, the people who took it in French, that it did not perform well. What they do is if they discover that the question did not perform as they had expected, in order to discern the novice lactation consultant versus someone who may not know anything, if it doesn't really discern that well enough, they'll throw the question out. And then they rescore the exam. So no one is dinged. Those who got it correct and those who got it incorrectly, they're not going to be dinged for answering that question correctly or incorrectly. And so that's the reason why we don't know exactly how many. I will say that in years past or in recent years, I have heard that the percentage to pass is somewhere around 75%. Sekeita, have you heard that number as well, or am I?
No, generally it's about in that range.
Right. So it could be
Generally it's about in that range. Yeah.
76% in one year. It could be 74% in another year, even as low as 72%, but I don't think it goes much lower than that. So, and this is information which is kept closely to the vest. So it's not out there in the public. So it really is something which is, which we can't find out, but we hear things from time to time from folks. So hopefully that answered the question. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I want to just add, and I know this wasn't a question, and maybe I said it and maybe not. Maybe I'm just in my head, but I do want to add, as I know that folks are getting their exam results from the last exam. I know that, and I'm not sure if there's someone on here, but there have been some folks that have not passed. So if you fall into that category, first of all, I want to encourage you. I want you to look at the areas, and this, I don't know if this still occurs, but the first time I took the test, they sent out what areas that that I had opportunity for growth. Um, the thing I want to say about that is take the opportunity, think about the areas, study those areas, but you also still want to stay current and study those other areas as well. Don't think, oh, I aced this part on the exam, so now all I need to do is just this part. I want you to think about this exam as this is the first time you're taking it. Now, it's not the first time. But when you're developing your study, you want to make sure that if you're taking this test again, that you are completely ready. So I just wanted to add that in because I've been, heavy in thoughts on some folks who were like, we're just 1 point. And so I want
Yes.
you
Oh my
to,
gosh.
yes, that is heartbreaking. So
That is so
wanted to add
heartbreaking.
that in. Yeah.
Indeed. And actually, I believe that someone did mention so, Facebook has all things,
Yeah.
and some are accurate and some are not. And so someone said on Facebook, so take it for what it's worth, everybody, that somebody posted that it was anywhere from 128 or 129 items, that if you got that many correct, then you pass the exam. And so just doing quick math, that's about 73%. So
Yeah.
that follows with the percent. And if they threw out a few though, right? If they threw out a few of the 175 questions which didn't perform well, then it may have been, a higher percentage. It could have been closer to 76%, but that was if they didn't discard any of the items.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there you go.
Angela, thank you for that because I wanted to say, because I'm only on Facebook really, is where I've seen most of the feedback from the exam. There is another question though. It says, is the test divided up into sections? Can you go back into each section and try to answer ones you didn't know or guess? So when you flag, it is divided into sections. It was two sections, and I'm saying that based on my prior knowledge of sitting that 5 years ago. However, if you flag it, you will more likely, and you have time, you can go back to that question and really take a second look and see if you want to change your answer or keep your answer, remember? And so I answered that one. There was another question that I thought, yeah, hold on. Maybe you answered,
There's a
maybe
couple of
Kim
good
answered.
ones. Yes. So someone is asking about up-to-date textbooks and such. And, I want to say that, yes, it is beneficial to have the most up-to-date, but remember I mentioned earlier that those people who take the exam in different languages, that sometimes they do not perform as well on the exam. The reason why has to do with the textbooks by which they have to study. So many times, like a textbook, for example, let's say Breastfeeding Answers, let's say that it was translated into Spanish, 5 years ago, and they recently updated a revised edition of it in English. If it was not translated into that other language, then the people who are studying that previous material. And IBLCE, though, understands this, and they actually won't take like something that was published in 2023 or even 2022. They may not include that on the exam because of their process, but that's the reason why folks who take the test in other languages may not do as well. It's because the textbooks that they have could literally be 15 years old, which was the last time in which that text was published in their language. And so really it's a barrier, it's really a structural issue with not having materials translated in all the languages by which IBLCE provides the exam. I hope that helps a little bit. So yes, you do need to know the up-to-date information. If you have access to an older textbook, by all means do consider studying from that. If there's any way that you can, borrow a more recent textbook, that's great. Also finding one which is relatively comprehensive, such as the ones that we mentioned, can be helpful as well, as opposed to something which is only focused on, let's say, supporting lactating families in a NICU setting, right? That's going to be super limited. So be mindful of that.
Yeah, thanks, Angela. There's another, nope, Kim flagged it and then she answered it. Cool beans. It was about QBanks. Where do we access QBank? But Kim answered that one. I
Yes, so
really,
it's on our website,
yeah,
lactationtraining.com, and you can get access to our exam review product that we have. So we also do have, somebody asked a question about flashcards. We actually do have flashcards as well. So I really think, though, to Sekeita's point earlier about flashcards, yes, it can be old school. Yes, I know you can actually, there are plenty of programs on your phone that you can create or on your mobile device that you can create. And there's also something about the actual writing of it, right? Then you've got this kinesthetic memory and this muscle memory for those things as well. So it's not just a matter of reading and or listening, but also movement. And so that can tap different ways of learning and different ways for you to be able to remember this information. As someone who's always writing notes, everyone knows that if I'm in a meeting, I'm always taking notes. The reason why is because that's what helps me to remember.
yeah. I just want to caution, even with the notion of memory, is when you're reading, read your textbooks like you're reading a journal to know it, right? Get engrossed in it. Because if you're just reading to learn, like I'm reading this because I have to, because I have to pass the test, sometimes we don't retain. We just don't. The other thing I want to tell you, and this was helpful for me, even, and yes, I did study 5 years ago, and I've been practicing, but I did study. The thing that was helpful for me, though, was reading the material, but I would also, if they're at the end of some of the textbooks, there are clinical pearls or takeaways. Those are the things that, although it was right there on the written right there, typed, I would write that in my handwriting. And then I'm a person, I do concept mapping. And so that's why I'm like, why do I keep forgetting to add that, right? But really read it, read the your textbook as though you're going to be practicing, meaning, how am I using this information? How does this information help me? And what does that mean for the families that I serve? If you can link the education in that way, that is what will help you be successful on the exam, because again, it is practice oriented. You don't expect to see things like, what cranial nerve controls the tongue, right? That is memorization. Okay, so that has practice implications, but it's not asking you to really transfer that knowledge into a clinical situation, if you can understand what I mean. So it won't be just like, what is lactogenesis, or this scenario, which lactogenesis is this? No, it's going to be more along, you may have a few questions like that, but it's really going to be more practice oriented. And so when I was speaking to my advanced practitioner folks and my physician folks, that's what I kind of was hinting and alluding at, is that sometimes as a nurse practitioner, the glucose protocol, it's a difference when you practice as one profession and then really thinking about, what truly does the evidence say? What have I learned the last 20 years that I've not been really considering the lactation goals of this family, if that makes sense? So I hope that wasn't a tangent, but I just really want folks to be prepared for how the exam is written.
Super helpful, super helpful. Thanks, Sekeita. And someone asked, I know you referred to it earlier, that you recertified, actually had to take that test 5 years ago. The certification, being an IBCLC, is good for 5 years. At the 5-year mark, so Sekeita is one of those, as am I, where you used to have to take the exam every 10 years. And then at 5 years, you recertify by continuing education. Currently, for those of you who are going to pass that exam when you take it in September, your certification will be valid for 5 years. At the end of the 5 years, or actually during that 5 years, you will take a CE, continuing education self-assessment. Once you receive the results of that, it will tell you in what areas you should get your continuing education points. In lactation land, it's called CERPS, which is continuing education recognition point. So then you will know which area of the detailed content outline you need to get your CERPS. And we're on top of that as well. We've got folks here to support your journey for recertification, for initial certification, exam prep. We've got you. And I mentioned earlier that Kim is from our amazing customer support team and is on the call. She's also an IBCLC. So we have several IBCLCs on staff, and we are really excited and enthusiastic about supporting your journey. So, one last question. When we pass to certification, start from the test date or the results date? That's a really good question. I believe it is the year.
It's the year.
The
It's on
year.
the year. Yep.
Right. So it's December 31 of that year. But recertification is in, oh, we have here, so Kim has said it's July 1st and January 1st. So I think though that it's the year. There goes Sekeita. She's probably looking at her first certificate right now. It could be for the year. And so that's just it. But I think it's in December. What do you think, Sekeita?
Okay, so I'm looking at my actual IBC, my little badge here, and it says valid until 2023. So that would
Okay,
be December
December.
31st. Yeah, so unless after, 5 years ago they changed it, but
Right.
that's a great question.
Well, and it's funny that you just went for that, because I actually had to recertify. Look at us being all ready for all these questions here. I actually just recertified last year,
Hmm.
and let me see what mine says. Oh, it has the year as well. So mine is
Okay.
valid until 2027. So
Okay. There we
indeed,
go.
there we go. It's until December. I will say though, for those of you for recertification though, you do not have until December. You have until September. And so Sekeita is on it. She said 2023. She is on it. She is taking her CE self-assessment because she does not want that to lapse at all. So
Listen, I do have to say this real quick. I was
please.
so shocked because I haven't been in the hospital setting since 2020. And they were like, you have to take BLS before you can even submit your application. And I was like, sure, my BLS. And I was like, so I
It's
had to
expired.
find some place to do it because you have to have your BLS prior to submitting. So
Basic
that's
life support.
yeah, yep, yes. So that's hopefully you will be in this situation. But I would say to you, if you're coming up on that fifth year, make sure because it will see changes, IBLCE that is, they change, and it's been a change and a continuous change. Some of the things have been COVID related, some of the things are just process related, or this worked or this didn't work. Candidates were upset about this. And so 4-year mark after you've been in IBCLC for 4 year, start really doing your CE assessment. Do all the things so that that fifth year there are no hiccups. You don't want to pass and then have to have a hiccup with your research. So that would be
Right.
my advice for you. So all these questions that you're asking in 4 years, come back, make sure you ask them. We'll have answers for you because it could be
Yes.
different.
We will. Yes, and we stay on top of it. As a matter of fact, the application deadline for the September exam has just been extended. So if y'all didn't know that, and actually I think one of the people on staff said don't tell people because June 22nd was the date, and I think now it's been extended to June 26th.
Six, yes.
Okay, yeah, good,
Yep.
good. I'm glad it's the same in both of our heads, Sekeita. So
Yes. Yep.
excellent, great. Well, thanks everybody for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. Great questions. I got challenged a little bit, like, ooh, so thank you for that.
Love it, love it. Well, have a great rest of your day. Make sure you grab the handouts real quick.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at support@lactationtraining.com. Thanks
Yes,
so
good
much.
luck. Best wishes. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.